Let's see. There we go. Okay, welcome everybody to Lunar Alchemy. My name is John. Here with always is Bella. And I'm super excited today because not only is it a full moon, but we're covering one of the central focuses of energy for our collective evolution at this time. We're going to be looking at the shadow of interference, talking about what it really means to follow your nose, the possible direction of human evolution. Are we all going to become a big hive of bees? And hopefully we'll get down into the possibility of exploring human fractals and even the source of the 144,000 that is often referred to in a variety of mythologies and religions. And in honor of today's solar transit through this 44th gate and the shadow of interference, we have invited in a very, very special guest that I'm so happy was able to join us. One of our human fractals, Endon Clark, who is a veritable wizard of human design and the gene keys. Really super excited to have him here with us today to discuss what's going on. And today also, I just want to mention, if you're watching us on Facebook, today's quantum healing transmission is going to be extraordinarily powerful in terms of lunar alchemy. It's really at the heart of how we are accessing these frequencies and energies, and how we can really truly begin to integrate every aspect of the 64 variables of our own genetic and DNA expression. So I'll post a link down there. If you're interested in receiving that, you can join us for that. That'll take place later on in the hour. But enough of me kind of in my introduction. Welcome, Endon, and Bella, so nice to see you as well. Endon, thanks for joining us. How are you feeling, Endon?
I'm feeling grateful to be here with you. Last time John and I were together, we were on top of a mountain. So the 6-line theme of today feels very succinct. So I'm really excited to be here and explore this transit.
Awesome, man. Well, always nice to have more 6 lines in the party, especially on a day like today. So it's the new moon, and we're in the 6th line, Bella, of this transit. So what's going on today? What's happening in the cosmos?
I looked at it and there's so many things. So let's see if I can be succinct or if the 6th line brings me away far. I mean, we see in this chart, the very obvious thing is this alignment between the moon and the sun, and then the earth activation and Uranus on this side. So this axis between Taurus and Scorpio. And we have, usually it's powerful when we just have the sun and the moon together. And now we happen to have Uranus here in the mix, and he's all about the unexpected and all about the future somehow as well. And Scorpio wants to go deep, and the way that we can see the 44, I like how Adela, an astrologer that is also a Gene Key ambassador, she speaks about the 44 as the karmic cleaner. So there is something here, what I feel, there is something we're cleaning. We have several activations here in Scorpio. We're cleaning something that for me has to do with our self-worth, which is a theme that we can speak about. Taurus is the theme of self-worth, of our kind of we coming out in the world and creating that foundation for ourselves. And what I see in the body graph is that we have a completely open ego center. And that is also a center of worthiness. I happen to have this completely open in my in my human design. And sometimes I feel like I don't really even have a reference point for what worthiness is. And then from human design, I learn, okay, don't overpromise, don't run in the hamster wheel. Like there are things that I have understood, but I think on a deeper, on a deeper place, when I go to Taurus and I go back to the body and to the earth element, that's where I can feel more of a groundedness. That's where I can feel an inner silence. That's where I can, come down from the mind that is so active and actually ground in the form, in the senses, in the sensuality. And for me, there is this amazing beauty between Scorpio and Taurus. And John, we were speaking last week about my moon in Scorpio and your moon in Taurus. For me, the combination here is to have this sensuality with the body, but also the depth in the intimacy and even in the sexuality, where for me, the sexual wound is one of the deep, it's probably the deepest wound. And it's deep, not only in our body, but in that place of like where life is made somehow. My Scorpio moon loves that kind of intensity. So there is something here where I feel like there is a reclaiming of this whole axis of the sensuality, of the sexuality, of the self-worth, and also some of these deeper karmic patterns that we're cleaning in. We have the possibility, and they probably have to do with our lineage. There's probably something that's been there from even before us, and that brings us to the gene keys, saying, everything we do here is like we are here in a grid, and we're working on those simplified 6 core wounds in our lifetime. And that's what it takes, the life to kind of unpack something and to actually do our work. So I think that is the most important thing to speak. And I would love to bring you two in, and maybe there is something more to come back to, but that feels like what's illuminated. And like you would say, probably, John, a new start. There is a possibility with a new moon for a new start with those themes. So I'm interested in looking at the whole frequency band of the 44 and bringing in that kind of programming partner polarity point with Taurus and Scorpio, which is very, very much alive right now.
Yeah. Something interesting, I didn't even realize this was going to be the case today, but I have the 44, an activated gate in Uranus. So today feels like a kind of this is apparently an important new moon for me. But I'd love to kind of open up the floor for your comments on what you see going on. I have a couple of specific questions I want to ask you, but I'm curious about what you see in relation. Bella just brought up a lot about what we're seeing in terms of the relationships between the sun and the moon and the earth and what's going on energetically around that. I'd love to hear what you are seeing as part of what's activated right now, or what's important about this transit through the 44th gate for you.
Thank you for that, John. Yeah, the first thing I noticed actually was particularly that the Scorpio was falling in the 4th house. So it just feels like there's a lot coming up here in the underworld around parents and around home, and just like our sense of location and our sense of belonging and sanctuary. So really like that kind of like ground zero of us, like where we feel the safest and we feel like a place of belonging. So I'm seeing there's some deep churning there with the moon, and particular maybe some of the astral emotional threads that are weaving there. And that's also, obviously being highlighted by the sun there. The other thing I noticed particularly is the energy of Mars that's also close to that relationship there with the sun and the moon. Mm-hmm. So there seems to be some maybe some heat, maybe some friction particularly that's coming up. That could be with our parents or with the people that we live with. And that could be where the Synarchy magic is most potent right now, is like, how do we actually find that space of authentic teamwork around the home, around, issues of like belonging and sanctuary. And that could be with, roommates, that could be with a team, that could be with our family. So I'm just kind of seeing that underworld stuff coming up there, particularly Scorpio being Plutonian, so there maybe it's intergenerational kind of themes that might be coming up there, or maybe differences around like generational perspectives, particularly with that karmic energy being cleared. And I see the Mars energy there too. So there is like some like action like that needs to be taken. And that could be that fulcrum between like really stepping up into the machismo, and like embodying that masculine energy of like what needs to be done and executing that. Mars being Aries, so like very like right off the cuff, like knowing how to act. And that fulcrum also being a point of like where we can slip into folly, because Aries is also the infant. So there could be some explosiveness and some tantrums and some outbursts and some very like, for lack of a better word, like maybe some childish reactions that could be showing up there. And that seems like that's a big part of the lunar alchemy in this moment, is like transforming that. It's being very deeply highlighted by the sun. So you have like sun, and you also have this very Plutonian energy there sitting in Scorpio. So it's like, it's really encapsulating the entire frequency band of the planets. So I'm just really noticing that. And I noticed Mercury's kind of sitting there right at the Libra Scorpio cusp. So there's like this, this just right there at the balance point where Libra is like balance and interrelational, like kind of equilibrium sits, but also like egressing into that territory there of like the unknown and the mystery and maybe the uncomfortable. So I could see that particular theme there being where the communication might be challenging when it comes to this teamwork and creating this synarchy. And maybe it's just like finding that inner and outer balance with Libra. That can be that maybe inner interference, outer interference experience. And like, how do I say this? How do I get this point across? Maybe, and with Mars kind of leading forward after that, like, how do I express this and not do it in such a hot, like kind of off the cuff way? And maybe there's a need to kind of contemplate what that really looks like. And I can see that being deeply grounded by the programming partner with the 24 and the Earth position there, particularly. We can be very addicted to our thoughts, that shadow frequency there of addiction, right? Addicted to our thoughts, addicted to talking. I'm seeing that relationship there, particularly with the Mars and the Mercury being close by. It could be maybe certain patterns that we're in a loop around, particularly with communication and also with like just shooting from the hip. So I can see the city of silence being the way that's really going to ground that. And that could actually be the evolutionary alchemy here with the moon, is actually, that gift of invention is like, how do I reinvent myself? How do I reinvent how I shoot from the hip? How do I reinvent how I communicate with that Libran balance, but also communicate in the unknown and the uncomfortable and like the death rebirth energy that is Scorpio. So I feel like there's kind of that like, there's a necessity to experience the void and maybe be in it a little bit longer than we would like. But that's going to be the grounding energy there. That's going to purify all of that lunar, solar, Martian, and mercurial energy as they're woven together around that big theme there, particularly with the fourth house, which I find to be very interesting because Taurus being the polarity there, Taurus naturally rules the fourth house. So there's some, there's like a beautiful kind of half birthday energy, like a programming partner role reversal there. And now Taurus is sitting in the 10th house. So there's, a lot about that culminating energy of action and how that could maybe be affecting reputation and our advancement and change and those bigger transpersonal themes. So it's beautiful just kind of seeing that that's all woven in there. It feels very, I think in my own personal life, it feels very, very right, very fitting right now.
Yeah, it's definitely, I love to hear what you're saying in terms of these relationships, because it very much describes how the solar transit throughout the entire year, how it brings these programming partners, and as the Earth orbits around the sun, how each one inhabiting the opposing structure brings us the opportunity for a deeper balance within ourselves that allows us to access the higher frequency expressions that are available through our genetics. So, Endon, you mentioned the spending some time with the void. And one of the things that, normally when we're in lunar alchemy, we tend to focus only on the shadow frequency. But today, I really want to open it entirely wide so we can examine not only the shadow, but the components of the city and the gift. And one of the things that your comment, Endon, brings me to is this idea of the three source codes, which in Richard Rudd's writing, he describes while speaking of the city of Synarchy. Of course, Synarchy it's like the opposite of anarchy. It's a method of governing like holistically together, all as one. Many different beings working together as one. This is kind of how a beehive functions. And when you look at these three source codes, there's the masculine and the feminine, which both Bella and Endon are talking about in terms of how we can understand these energies in the cosmos. And then there's also the third, which is described differently as the 0 point, the void. You can think of it as source, that concept of whatever is beyond manifest creation. There is this vast void. And that is one of the three within the source codes of fractal creation. So what I'm thinking about is, like when we think about, okay, we have this particular energy is manifesting right now at the new moon, but how can we look at this idea of moving into the void, or even looking at a practical idea of overcoming generational differences in viewpoints. This is sort of a practical thing. If you happen to have a relationship with a parent or an elder and there's differences in perspectives, that difference needs to be overcome somehow, and we can go, okay, rah, teamwork. But I'm curious, Endon, if you and Bella, please chime in as well. If you can tie in this concept of human fractals and these three source codes, how they can function through us to lead us into an experience of teamwork or an experience of the shadow. And what can we do to either expand that gift or to help evolve the experience of that shadow into its next expression? Hopefully that's a clear question. It was certainly wordy.
You want to start, Indon? Do you feel something spontaneous?
Sure, I'd love that. When I think about these three source codes, Obviously the first thing that comes to mind is the Trinity that's found throughout all major world religions. And there's many ways of looking at the Trinity, mind, body, spirit, mother, father, Holy Ghost, the child, right? And the child is that unifying thing that brings the mother and the father together. Just very, I think very succinct with this fourth house energy of the home and family. But when I think of these three source codes, I think of the necessity of interference, the necessity for the greater evolution of these core fractals to find their higher order and the higher synarchy. At some point, these arms that are spinning have to coalesce and they have to converge. They have to literally interfere with what we could call, the purity of their fractal, their transmission. But that interference is a necessity, just like a newborn child can interfere with the previous life of the mother and father, right? It's like the crying in the night. It's actually the sharpening of those maternal and paternal qualities of the family members as they're learning to like steward this child into its adulthood, right? And that might interfere with their, maybe they like to stay out late and they like to gather and they like the freedom. But now there's this interference, but that's also shaping them into this higher form of being. And so these core source fractals eventually have to blend and they have to meet each other. And that actually can be seen as interference. Or that's like the necessary interference. It's actually the interaction and the engaging quality of these apparent opposites, these differences that when woven together are creating a higher orchestration, higher harmony of what is possible. And I think that it moves from that potentiality of these original streams into like higher possibility, right? When these waves crash upon each other. And I see the beauty of that because it's just a part of the journey to becoming the next version of the one great being. We all are a part of the one great being, right? And the one great being has then divided itself and then blended itself, and it's in the great cosmic, Vitamix of life, and it's learning to synthesize on a much deeper level. So I see that interference being so crucial to our evolution and to the evolution of teamwork. Like, I know for me personally, I have not, the extent in which I have learned to be a syn architect, and be a team player is equal to the extent that I have caused or experienced interference, right? Because we feel like the static and the crunchiness of what that feels like when it's not working and there's that friction, right? So the interference is literally like the launch pad to greater levels of teamwork. And like something that comes to mind, I've been thinking about this call today, and one of the things that really comes to mind is we had this journey up the mountain on the Lion's Gate this year. Very 6-line, right? So all the 6 lines in the building. This is a very 6-line quality because it was actually like we had to go up the mountain, and John and the team had already gone up the mountain. And I was chosen to lead a team to carry up base camp. And and it wasn't just like your regular little hike. We were up there for about 5 days. John and a team of people had been up there for 2 days already previously before us hiking up base camp. I had an 80-liter bag full of food and tents and sleeping bags and supplies. And, I had heard from one of the people that was organizing it that, they were just kind of like packing really light on food. And I was like, we're going to be up there like 5 days. Like, we're summiting 4 different mountains, you know, we had in regards to the grid worker, right? We were really in the essence of the grid worker, right? That Unlock Your Design describes the 44th gate in Gene Key as. Like, we were really in the grid worker archetype, and that's what we were doing. And I was like, I have to make sure these people are nourished. My life's work is 27. So I'm like, I have to nourish my people. Like, I have to. And at one point in the journey, the shadow of interference had come up with some other people in the group that hadn't slept well the night before, that were struggling to summit with other people's gear. You know, they were carrying more than they felt that they could carry. And there was this kind of, you know, the dilemma of the 44's hierarchy. And so there was like this kind of like bickering about like the person who had led the trip, and there was some tension there around having to carry their stuff. And I just committed to the process, because I knew that, like, if I didn't get up the mountain and I didn't get to base camp, my people wouldn't be fed. They wouldn't have shelter. They wouldn't have their supplies. And I'm like, you know, I'm like the smallest guy on the trip. Like, you know, I've got a metal leg. I've got the 80-liter bag with like more supplies than everyone else. And I'm just like, you know what? And I just went full manifester mode. And I was like, okay, it's going to happen. It's going to manifest. And I just dropped into my peace. I dropped into peace, even with like the cloudy thoughts of like people's like bitterness and resentment and frustration. And it was just committing to it. And so my ability to embrace the interference that was percolating, right? That allowed me to also interfere with the interference. And I just pierced through it. And I was able to actually get up the mountain. And that teamwork and the ability to help everyone get their needs met, to be in that center and say, hey, all right, you can't go any further. All right, let me take from you, wait, I'll take what we need to get up to the other team. Let me, you know, send off supplies for you to go create another base camp down the mountain, you know, because I'm a sixth line. I got to go all the way to the roof. So, you know, I'll support you to be down here and have your securities and have everything met. And it was able to like make sure everybody had their needs met. And even though there was, quote unquote, this interference, it was perfect, because we actually, once we reflected on it, we actually were holding the grid in multiple octaves of the mountain. There was a team holding the middle of the mountain. There was also a team back at the retreat center holding the frequency and the grid down in town. And then there was those of us up the mountain. So we actually realized at the end that there was a higher order of things playing out that allowed us to do greater grid work. And the things that came up that were interference patterns were actually all a part of the clearing and the work that we had to do. And we had a wonderful journey, you know, on the top of the roof there on the top of the mountain. And it was such a blessing. And I felt so much peace in my heart to know that whatever was happening wasn't breaking my spirit and my desire to be a part of the teamwork and to interfere with the interference, and to like do that in a humble way where I could access the humility to keep going. John, Remy.
I was muted. I love how you have described that experience, Endon, because one of the largest traps that we fall into as human beings on a path of development, on a path of personal evolution, is witnessing the shadow and going, oh, all that stuff is bad. We need to eradicate it. And your description was a perfect example of how the interference pattern allowed for a higher organization to manifest through each of us as fractals of this master design that is going on of humanity. And the only thing that I wanted to add to your story was how a little bit about how this 44th gate functions in a human being who is able to access it. You know, if you don't have the 44th gate active in your chart, it doesn't mean you can't do this too. You may have some deeper memories of this in your fractal lineage, but when this hikers group, who was all a part of about 10 people in total, all met virtually online, I instantly had the smell of Endon's commitment to the teamwork and to the success of the vision. And I could smell, this is smell right, you know, in quotes, I could smell right away that we could absolutely rely on Endon to fulfill his commitment for the rest of the team, who was, he didn't mention, absolutely life or death, maybe not life or death, but very close to life or death dependent on Endon's team fulfilling their role. And my experience of, you know, getting that size up, that instantaneous sense of a person, that here's a person with whom I can experience teamwork, with whom this team can function at each with their individual roles in perfect harmony with him. And that's one of the keys, I think, to this overall pattern of, you know, a lot of people have been talking about karmic relationships, twin flames, this sort of movement into finding your soul tribe. I can't tell you how many people are online trying to teach you how to discover and connect with your soul tribe. And the process of doing that, from the perspective of the 44th gene key, is about following your nose. It's about getting a sensation in your body that here's a person that I'm inspired to connect with. And when we come into relationship together, then we discover, are there interference patterns present, or can we manifest the full programming partner and manifest a higher harmony, and through the synarchy of our combination. And the harmony is that city of the 26, is that what it is? Anyhow, when you can sense another person, that impulse to connect, you may have those interference patterns arise. That doesn't mean that your connection was wrong, or that that person does not belong in your experience. So for all of the people who are currently working through their gift of empathy and the people that they have attracted into their lives to experience how empathy functions in different settings, you may be experience interference patterns that we can, or is very tempting to call a narcissistic partner. Now, whether or not they're narcissistic is pretty beside the point, because it's all about your experience. But when you connect with another person and there's interference, one of the important aspects is to recognize that your sense of smell, your attractive, how you are attracted to another person, is guiding you forward through your process of evolution, regardless of whether that sense of smell is a reactive shadow pattern of misjudgment, or a repressive pattern where instead of misjudging, you kind of go inwards instead. So Bella, I want to hear your thoughts, and I want to save a little bit of time for you and Endon to just share a little bit about what you two are working on collaboratively together as what I feel is likely to be an absolutely astoundingly beautiful manifestation of Synarchy. So, Bella, I want to ask you your thoughts on everything that we've been talking about and sharing, and then maybe we could get a chance before the transmission to talk a little bit about what you two are doing together.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's connected. I have the 44 in my culture sphere, and this is Jupiter on the design side. So it is going to have to do with my expansion. And in the gene keys, we call it culture, but we can also say it's kind of what's there every day. It's always going to be there, and it's how I interact with others. And I think in whatever team I come in, this 44 comes in with me. And I have it in a third line, which is about dynamism. And it's also like both of you are saying, it's not about saying, oh, the shadow frequency, we don't want it, or we just want the city. The third line is really trial and error, like living all the flavors of life and tasting everything, and even laughing sometimes at the interference patterns. And I can see myself being somebody sometimes did parties in Sweden when I still lived there. And I used to have all these different kind of, not just friends, but groups. And that's the third line in the culture in the 44. It's all about small groups. So I have a lot of small groups of people that I interact with. But then for a party, I would invite everybody. And it would be this like soup of people that really, some are from business school, some are from salsa, some are like, they're all from different places. And I do that to kind of like observe it and see the team dynamics that are created. That two people come from completely different worlds with completely even different native languages and cultures. What happens when we meet, when we put them together? Because there is like an underlying dynamic or alchemy. Like when you said the 3 source codes, I was thinking about Hermes, Buddha, and Jesus. And Hermes is that alchemy. There is the alchemy of life. And whether we look at bees or we look at flowers and nature, everything seemed to have that. And I think as human beings, because we are so smart, a little bit too smart for what's good for us, I think we create those artificial patterns that isn't really how we would move in the grid you both were talking about before naturally. So when I can kind of steer a little bit of that artificial, oh, I only hang out with this people and I only hang out with this people, and see what happens when naturally I just bring humans together. My third line really thrive on that. I feel like the dynamism and the newness of what comes up with that is so amazing. And I really feel like there is something in me that also always feels that teamwork with people. Like, I think that's one of the reasons why I've started to speak many languages, because I come to a country and I know if we have that language barrier, it's going to be like some interference where we don't feel like we come together in teamwork. So the understanding of how can I communicate with you? And you were saying too, the smell, communication is not just words, but how can we tune into the other? How can we feel the other? And that has very much to do with that tribal circuitry that you mentioned too, with the 44 and the 26. Like, how do we come together? How is there transmission that want to happen through us? And very much, I guess, to weave back to that, to those 3 source codes, when we have wisdom or alchemy, that's the natural, not the corrupted grid, but the natural grid of alchemy that is here in this program that we are part of. And then we have the presence of the Buddha, and we have the love of Jesus. Then it's just, for me, those are 3 ingredients that when we can have them in any team, then there is an expansion, there is learning, there is beauty, there is friendship for sure. So I want, those are 3 keywords for us to remember, I believe, that are amazing for building, for actually tuning into the teams. And that's what I feel too with the story that you guys have together, that you could turn around in a way that situation by coming in that compassion with the other, in the presence of what's needed now. And and that comes from the wisdom that you both kind of sit with, 6'2", I'm sitting here and I know that I can sit and listen to so much wisdom. So it's nice to be here and weave with you.
Oh, thank you for that, Bella. That's really nice to hear some of your experience with how to manifest this experience of teamwork through what you've been experiencing, because every single person is going to have such a unique pathway in terms of how they function within a team. Every single person has such a unique role and such a unique offering. I mean, for me, I was laughing just listening to, as Indon and I got into a few conversations on the side of the mountain. I was like, oh my gosh, it's like, it's a 36-4, two 6-2s multiplied by each other. It becomes this sort of like really, really hyper intensive conversation that goes so deep and so like expansive. It's really, really hilarious. And for me,
John, I have one thing to say about
yeah.
the shadow frequency, because I know we haven't spoken so much about that today.
Yeah.
I think that what you said about the no's are important. I know in a team when there's interference, and like I already have the intuition, this is a splenic gate. So I already know that it's going to end bad, but there is something in my 4-6 that really wants it to end well. So I pour in some more love, some more wisdom, some more presence. But like really, when it comes to the body awareness, I already recognize those patterns, and that maybe that's not it. It's not always a wrong thing to dissolve a team, and that I feel like that brings us into what Indon and I are doing, the way that we came together. We have kind of flowed in and out in the Jinky community, in the human design community, in like this for many years now, I believe. But the fact that we came together and want to create more like what we see kind of a movement that has to do with this 44th Jinky it was natural. It was one person, Anders, who has land in Northern California, who had been speaking with me and who has been speaking with Indon. And then like everything, the alchemy aligned. And then I brought in Ashley, and we have Brittany as well, who's a 4-6 and has resonated with the things that I put out in the world. And it was that moment where it could start to crystallize. And what I feel with what we are doing, we did put an intention together. There was an amazing teamwork where we are in a synarchy, we're all good at different things, and we come together. And I feel with this new moon that we are just starting it. It feels like it's not a one-off. And I think this is the way to build a new world. We come together today, and it's not a one-off. Like, we are going to come together in more constellations. You're going to meet on the mountains. Maybe sometimes we come, all three of us. Then Indon and I are working with another team. Like, this is the way that we move in and out of those fractal patterns. And for me, that's the greed, that's the beauty. And that's the way that I actually allow the flow of life to put me in different constellations with new people. And that's where my third line in my culture as well, like, feels so excited, because and that's something, a parenthesis, Ashley, who I work with, has had to accept that for me, teamwork is not rigid in one group. I want to be able to move with many amazing beings, so I cannot be held hostage or in one place. I love when we have those natural formations of inspiration, of people that want to create together. So that would be my kind of, at least, introduction into Synarchy, and the first event that we are planning to do in December at Heartland in Northern California.
That's beautiful. I love that description. And Indon, I would love to ask you, you and Bella are working together on an in-person event to take place in California. I would love to hear what your vision is. Why did you choose the 44? And I mean, obviously it has a big role in how it's coming together, but I'm curious just to hear your perspective on the creation process of this and what you're looking forward to with this event.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think I feel like this is true for many of us. Once you read the 44 and you tap into the essence of what it is, there's not a mental knowing, but there's something that registers in the body about the profoundness of what that is. And I think it's one of those, particularly the Siddhi, it's one of those words that stands out. It just really stands out when you look at all the keys. It's like, what does that even mean? So it already like kind of lures you in. And I think it's something that also like our bodies are craving in a way, not just like mentally, like the satisfaction of doing things well, but like the form consciousness really wants. I always see this like Megazord. I don't know, for all like those out there that like remember Power Rangers and like I just see humanity assembling into this amazing like savior, like just epic being. And I know it's possible. I don't know how up here because it's in the spleen, but I can sense intuitively how that geometry clicks together, and I can feel the joy of that in my body when it happens. And there's like no other high. There's no other like point of ecstasy that can be experienced in that way. That's not just in my personal aura, and not just in a relationship with one other aura, but in the field of geometry that is a larger web of life. And that is the thing I think that has always called me to deepen into this exploration of what Synarchy is. And just to give like a little backstory, like I came deeper into human design and the gene keys actually as a permaculture designer. And I did wild habitat restoration all over the Four Corners, and particularly working with tribal nations and water issues around water. I actually helped get the gray water law passed here in the state of Colorado and the rainwater ban lifted here in the state. And it's always been a big piece for me. One thing I always saw missing in the permaculture community was conversations and like blueprints around like human permaculture, like the invisible patterns that is really the communitecture, like the architecture of community and relationship. And that's where I deepened my love for human design, because it was a thing I always saw missing. Is like we could stand behind the same cause and share like the fiery passion of like saving the world and justice and all these things. And with so much emotional charge, it made it really hard for people to actually like find the equilibrium of their teamwork together. And so I always saw that as like the trigger that was like collapsing all these beautiful movements. So I really wanted to get down to the bedrock of like, what does it mean to work well with others? Because we've all been raised and conditioned to isolate ourselves. I mean, that is the victim pattern of the 44 is isolation. Like we're experiencing that now more than ever, right? And so like, I personally just really, it's my Pluto, both my Plutos. I have 44 line 4 and 44 line 6. And the 44 line 4 is honesty, and to be honest, like we could do better as a species and as a planet and as society. And me on a personal level, like I can do better. There are ways that I interfere, and I want to be better at teamwork. And the line 6 is the aloofness, right? That's the name of the line, is like because at the level of the 6, like you're already looking to the next hexagram. And it's not the 4 line 6 isn't really concerned with the ego because it's transitioning beyond it. Like it's not just looking at the 26 across the channel, but it's looking at the whole circuit and like beyond the circuit. Like, what does it mean to like move beyond? Like, all right, we've got all our needs met. We were surviving on the material plane. The whole kingdom is accounted for. Our bodies are taken care of. We're emotionally supported. Like everything's moving. Resources are being distributed. And then what? And that's what I'm most excited to experience. Like I want to actually taste the and then what? Because I can smell it. I can smell it. I can smell that future moment. I can smell that precipice of like what that is. And so we've decided to create this event because I know many of us are experiencing it. Many of us have that scent on our trail, you know, like we want to reach that culmination point where we can megazord together, and we can do that effortlessly in a way where we've experienced enough interference. You know, we've interfered with our own gifts and our own talents and our own path in this life enough to like get out of our own way. And we've interfered enough with others that now we're learning how to support them for who they are and their unique way of doing things. And we've interfered with enough like missions and visions and teams that we're now willing to break the pattern of that addiction. And the way that we think that is continuing to feed that addiction pattern, which is the programming partner to the 44 with the 24. We're ready to change that. We're ready to reinvent what it is to be humanity and to be teams and families and lovers and households and all of these things. And I think that, you know, we need that space. We need a place where we can actually like, there's literally enough space for us to explore all these new geometries of being together as one. And so Synarchy is an event that we have curated to actually embody that, not just here on Zoom, you know, live online, but like live in aura, you know. And there's something that Richard said that I'm so curious to explore this and like to maybe be a pioneer in this field, this holographic field, is that there's certain things, oracally speaking, that cannot be activated conceptually, but it's something that actually can only take place when certain pools of people and fractals come together. Actually, like we are being invited by the program to interfere. We're being invited to interfere with the way things have been. And we're being invited to interfere with the comfort of our fractal. To experience new people. To work with Bella is a new experience. And I'm excited. I am so grateful for the ways that I get reflections from her and Ashley and Anders and Brittany that are interfering with my old way of being. So I can actually be a better team member. So like it's opportunity to experience that. And we all need that. And so I'm just so like humbled to see what we're creating this winter because now more than ever, as we're approaching 2027, like we need templates in place. We need hologenetic protocols at a societal level in place for those of us that are standing on the front lines, ready to integrate the wisdom of these systems, the prophecy and the cosmology of these systems, and be prepared for not just a shift to a new cross, but the closing of an entire age. As the cross of planning is crumbling before our eyes and the phoenix is awakening from its sleep, from its slumber, rising from the ashes, you know, I want to be ready for that. I want to be ready with a plan, which is a plan that can accommodate anything that doesn't have a plan. And that means I need to understand actually my puzzle piece, and I need to be able to read the braille, which is the holographic language of others. So that way I know whatever kind of thing shows up and whatever unfolds, that I know how I can fit in and how I can guide others to be in the present moment without plans, without mental constructs, with that emotional intelligence that allows us to walk through the door of the unknown.
Yeah, that's really, really beautiful description of this incredible purpose that you two are manifesting. And one of the things that I think is exciting about this vision is that it is proactively making space for the manifestation of the city of Synarchy, which, when you look at it from the perspective of self-identity and reincarnation, the Synarchy is actually the obliteration of the individual, to where, as an aspect of the whole, you have access to the whole. So, Endon, in your describing learning about the holographic nature of the other people in your teams, this is like the absolute quality of this particular energy that is working through this new moon, to not only be able to perceive, but to actually inhabit the energy flow of those who are around you, who are working in common with you. So, I mean, it's really exciting to hear about that. If you're watching today and you're feeling your inner spleen energy get all excited about the possibility of what Bella and Endon are describing, Bella, you can see this on Unlock Your Design. Can you explore the Synarchy event there? You're muted.
I have everybody live, so I'll put it in there, and
Great.
it's synarchy.us. So
Okay.
synarchy.us.
Awesome.
So it's
Awesome.
the new us, the new world.
I like that. Synarchy.us. Perfect. So, for those of you on Facebook, thank you for joining our discussion. We're going to continue with our solar members for a quantum transmission of energy to allow our inner beings to entrain our frequency to the original source code pattern of creation. At the Big Bang, there was the trinary pattern that went out in ever evolving spirals and eventually became each one of us. And through that process, there was a great number of interferences that we are also working our way back through to create a perfect resonant harmony with the original source code. And that's what today's quantum transmission is about. If you want to join the solar membership, you can have access to that through Unlock Your Design. I posted that on Facebook. And we meet every Thursday at 5 p.m. I forgot to mention the new moon actually aligned during our session, which was pretty cool. I mean, the number of, I can't even call them coincidences anymore. The synergistic quality of events that happens around lunar alchemy is really astounding. So if you're watching today, there's no mistake going on here. It didn't happen by chance. We're speaking directly to you, and we would love to have you be a part of this journey around the entire transit of each of the 64 variations of our genetic expression. So we will see you next time. And thank you for joining us. We'll continue now with our solar members. Indon, thanks so much for everything. Please stay with us for our conclusion here. We'll see you next time, Facebook.